Let's go over dividing radical expressions. Let's say we have square root of 25 divided by the square root of 9. Okay, for this one we could just do the square root of either one of these and then simplify it. So radical 25 is 5 and the square root of 9 is 3, and then there's not much to do. Okay, what if we had the square root of 50 over the square root of 18? What do we do here? Well, we could again simplify both of these if we want to. So let's see, what goes into 50? Well, 25 and 2, and 25 is a perfect square, so that works out. This one will be the square root of 9 over the square root of 2. Now we're going to simplify this just like we would anything else. We could reduce things, we could do radicals, the square root of things. So the square root of 25, for example, is 5, so it's going to be 5 radical 2. The square root of 9 is 3, so this is 3 radical 2. And just like if we had 5x over 3x, the x's would cancel out. In this case, 5 radical 2 over 3 radical 2, the radical 2's cancel out. So again, in this case, left with 5/3. Of course, they're not all going to work out like this. So let's look at another example. Let's see. So radical 27 over radical 30. Okay, so let's break this down. If we can break it down, what goes into the square root of 27? Well, 9 and 3 go into it. So we could do radical 9, radical 3. Then square root of 30 does not break up. It's just square root of 30. Okay, the square root of 9 is 3, so we have 3 radical 3 over radical 30. And that's pretty much as far as we could go with the radicals. Okay, but this is not the final answer. Okay, because we do not want there to be a radical in the denominator. But even more so, we could reduce this. So that brings up a good point that I want to go over, is like if we had something like this, the square root of 15 over the square root of 5, we could divide this just like we would do with regular fractions. So 5 goes into both of these. So 15 divided by 5 is 3, so this could be radical 3, and this would just be radical 1. So we're left with radical 3. So another way to look at that would be radical 15 over radical 5. This is really the square root of 5 times the square root of 3 over the square root of 5. These cancel out, and we're just left with radical 3. So now let's apply that to this question here. So we have 3 radical 3 on top. There's nothing we can do with that. But this 30 could be broken up a lot of ways. And one way is by breaking up as radical 3 and radical 10. So here, these are going to cancel out. And we have 3 over radical 10. Okay, this is still not the correct answer, because we want to rationalize the denominator. So we don't want this radical 10 to be here. So the trick to getting rid of this is just multiply the numerator and denominator by radical 10. So on top we're going to get 3 radical 10. Then the square root of 10 times the square root of 10 is just 10. So if you multiply the square root of a number by the square root of that same number, you're going to get that. And it happens because square root of 10 times square root of 10 is square root of 100, and that's the same as 10. But you could just skip that step and do square root of 10 times square root of 10 is going to be 10. So like the square root of x times the square root of x would just be x. So this is the final answer to this problem here. So let's look at some more. Let's look at the square root of 45 over the square root of 15. So let's say we break this down. Square root of 45 breaks down into radical 9, radical 5, and the square root of 15 is just the square root of 15. There's no perfect square that goes into it. The square root of 9 is 3. So this is 3 radical 5 over radical 15. these can be reduced because radical 5 goes into both. This becomes a 1. This becomes a radical 3. So now you have 3 over radical 3. Alright, now we don't want this radical in the denominator. We have to rationalize it. So let's multiply the denominator and the numerator by radical 3. So we get 3 radical 3 on top. Then radical 3 times radical 3 is 3, which cancels, and we're left with radical 3. So this is a 100% correct way to solve it, but it's probably not the best way to solve this one. But really, any way you get the right answer is a pretty good way to do it. We could reduce this right off the bat. 15 goes in both of these numbers. So divide this by 15, we're left with just radical 1, which is 1. Divide this by 15, we're left with radical 3. So radical 3 over radical 1, square root of 1 is 1, is just radical 3. And I'll explain it one more way. Radical 15 over radical 15. I'm sorry, radical 45 over radical 15. 45 is really 15 times 3, so radical 45 is radical 15 times radical 3. This is radical 15. They cancel, and we're left with radical 3. So 2 different options to solving the same problem. We got the same answer both ways.